So about a month ago, I made a new purchase. I have picked up the new Player One Poseidon-C color cooled astrophotography camera. And before I get started, I just wanted to let you know that I paid for this camera with my own money, so this is not a sponsored video. So all my opinions are my opinions and my opinions only. This is my first dedicated astrophotography camera. As a lot of you know, if you've been watching the channel, I've been shooting the past year with a Canon M50 Mark II with good results. But I figured it was time for me to step up. I've already been asked quite a few times how I landed on choosing Player One, so I want to talk about that a little bit. As I was going through the different types of cameras, I was looking at ZWO and going back and forth with which one I wanted to end up with. Finally got to the point where I decided I was just gonna bite the bullet and get the ASI 2600. Wasn't quite ready to purchase at the moment that I made the decision, but soon after that I came across the Poseidon camera. And, I know it doesn't make a difference, but the thing that caught my eye right out of the gate was just the design of this thing. It's not your typical cylinder shaped camera like everybody else is doing. A little bit of an octagon shape, I guess you would consider it. It has USB-C ports on the back, which I'm a big fan of. I hate the USB-A's and the USB-B ports. That was the draw to it. Starting to do some research, it comes similar to like the 2600 does, with the tilt plate on it, but this one has rear facing screws to make your adjustments. There's one there. Now it's kind of hard for you guys to see, but you can make adjustments to the tilt plate with these push-pull screws while it's still in your image train. So, for me right now, I just have a filter drawer and my off-axis guider, so nothing would be actually blocking those screws. But if you're in a situation where you had a filter wheel and it was covering up those screws and you wanted to make adjustments to your tilt plate, you do your measurements, take the camera off, make your adjustment, put it back together. A little bit of a pain. I know it's not something we have to do all the time, but I like to keep things as simple as possible for the times that I do have to work with them. The other thing, like I mentioned previously, we have USB-C ports on here. And they're tight. They're not loose. They don't fall out. The way with my cable management, I don't have any concerns with tripping over them and pulling them out. Everything is on top of my scope, so that's not an issue for me. And honestly, you'd have to trip over this thing pretty hard to pull those out. It's 12 volts, 3 amps. The 3 amps comes into play when it's maxed out. We have control over the amount of power that the cooling system uses, and the only reason you would need power is for the cooling system. If you wanted to run the camera without cooling it, you just plug it in the USB and off it'll go. And probably the big decision maker for me in deciding between the Player One or the ZWO was the issues ZWO was having with the 2600 with the oil leak, with the grease leak. I know it's not that big of a deal. I know they were taking care of it for most people, and I also seen videos on YouTube showing how to clean them, and it wasn't that big of a deal. But I don't know about you guys, but when I'm spending this kind of money, I don't want to have to deal with issues like that. I know ZWO has resolved those issues, but in my mind, my fear was if I bought one of those cameras and it was one of the old stock, basically old new stock, and I end up with a camera that has that problem. I just don't want to take the risk. Not knocking ZWO, not saying the 2600 isn't a fantastic camera. I'm sure you guys have seen online people that own them, they love them. I can't do a fair comparison between the two, but I think they are comparable. They both use the IMX571 sensor chip in here. So the diagonal on that chip is 28.3, 26 megapixel camera, pixel size is 3.76, chip size 23.5 by 15.7, and full well depth on this, 71.7. It's a 16-bit camera. I mean, this thing's just awesome. Like I said before, not only does it look great, it performs even better. I've only had it for about a month, as I said before. Only had a few clear nights where I was able to use it, and I've been going back and forth with different configurations on my 8-inch Edge HD, both with and without the reducer, and just got fantastic results with it. So some of the other things, there's a little rubber plug, just so you guys are aware, right here. And I was talking with the CEO from Player One about it because I was curious. I thought maybe it was a desiccant tube or something in there. That is what's in there. But it's also, there's a screw or a bolt of some kind. And so in part, they use that to seal the camera. There are no additional desiccant tubes or tablets or whatever they put in this thing that come with the camera. They don't sell them on their website, but They did tell me when I asked about it that if ever there was a dew problem, that desiccant should last quite some time. But if anybody ever did have a problem with dew forming, they would send them a replacement desiccant insert for the camera. Speaking of support, I haven't had any issues, but I have been talking with them, and specifically, like I said, the CEO of the company, and they've been very responsive. I have a friend who owns the same camera too, and he had some questions, and he had a response within, I think it was within 48 hours. They're on top of their game. They really want a piece of this industry, and you can tell by the design quality and the performance of this camera. So the first thing that I did was when I got it, because of course clouds, right? So I used SharpCap to run a sensor analysis on this, and this is actually something that Player One encourages you to do yourself on their website. If you go through the specs and look at all the graphs, they want everybody to know that they're not just making up these numbers. They were lab tested, right? They did the same sensor analysis test to get to the graphs that they have on their website. So that's what I did. And the sensor analysis match what they're showing on their website, meaning depending what gain you're set at, as you go towards zero, you're using more of your well depth. As you go higher up, 100, 200 and such, you're using less of that well depth, but you're also getting less noise in the image. So the sensor analysis showed me, and you can see it right here, that our unity gain, which is kind of like the sweet spot, right? The best of both worlds. The unity gain is right around 20-25, which means that we'll be using most of our well depth with minimal noise being produced within the image. So I ran the camera through with N.I.N.A. We'll take a look later at what the noise just looks like to our eyes versus how it's being measured. The other thing to note is 0 amp glow, so you don't have to deal with that. I know they can be calibrated out, but again, the less things I have to worry about, the better, right? And one thing I did want to clear up, I've seen some reports online about the Poseidon, the color camera, the one we're reviewing today, having an industrial grade sensor in there. That's not true. I also spoke with Player One about that. The color camera does not have an industrial grade sensor. Actually, there's not even an industrial grade sensor, the IMX571. There is another sensor that is more expensive, and during their testing, deciding which sensor they would use out of the two, they went with the consumer grade one because there were no seen benefits implementing the more expensive sensor in there. So all it would have done was just jack the price up on this thing. Now, they did tell me that their Poseidon mono camera, that one does in fact use an industrial grade sensor. So I think that's where the confusion came in. So I just wanted to clear that up in case you guys have seen other reviews or read other reviews about the camera. So real quick, I'm going to show you what comes in the box so you know what to expect if you purchase this yourself. Then we'll get this hooked up to the scope and run you through a session. My name is Rich, and you're watching Deep Space Astro. So I'll show you guys what comes in the box here. They actually give us 3 cables. We got a 2-meter USB-C to USB-A cable. And this is the camera in case itself right here, but we're gonna set that to the side just for a second. Go over the rest of the accessories that come standard with this package. Next cable is a short USB-C to USB-C. And then they also give you a USB-C to a USB-B cable. So this is the case, nice hard shell. It's rigid, it's not solid plastic, so it does have a little flex to it. The inside is felt lined. You get a nice bulb to blow the dust off of your image train. It also comes with 2 spacers as well as a nose piece, and these 2 spacers, the first one's 17.5 millimeter and then the other one's 20 millimeter, combined and screwed onto the front of the tilt plate of the camera, which has a sensor spacing of 17.5 that'll get you to your 55 millimeter back focus spacing that you need. And the crown jewel obviously is the camera itself, and this thing is just beautiful. I love the design on this. It's kind of like a stretched octagon. On the back here you can see the fan as well as our 12-volt input for the cooler and the heater. You have 2 USB-C ports, one for the main connection to your PC, the other one for an accessory such as a filter wheel, the tilt plate with the back-facing screws. Just the design quality on this thing is just outstanding. Right down to the sensor dust cover. You can see on the inside of the threads here, it has a rubber O-ring to keep everything nice and sealed, so there's no chance of anything getting into your sensor when it's on. Just really thought through well. And then finally, they also give you a strap for some cable management if you need it. And they also give you a little bag of screws, which are used for their accessories, like their filter drawer. Their filter drawer actually screws into the tilt plate itself. You can also screw in a ZWO filter drawer if that's what you have. And I'll show you guys that in a minute. That's what I'm using for my setup. And then Also give you a little Allen key too to work with the screws with if you need, both for installing their accessories or making adjustments to the tilt plate. So like I mentioned before, I don't have Player One's filter drawer, but I do have a ZWO filter drawer as well as the Celestron off-axis guider. But just to show you, I mean, the holes in the front here that you see on the tilt plate, these are those screws in the bag that I was showing you in the beginning of the video that you actually remove the tilt plate. Player One's filter drawer attaches with those screws, or you can use an existing filter drawer like the ZWO that I have, and it'll thread right on there for you. So everything mates up just the same as it would whether you use their products or a third party. So what I have here now is my required back focus spacing is 133.35 millimeter. I am actually at 130.7, so I'm 2.65 millimeters off. It doesn't make that much of a difference, at least not to my eye. Maybe to some of you hardcore guys it does. But so that's where we're at with the back focus. So here we are over in N.I.N.A with the camera connected. Outside of just general information here, you can see all the controls. This is the native driver. There is also obviously an ASCOM driver. The native driver works perfectly so far. We had zero problems with the latest version available on their website. You can see you have dew heater control to help keep that sensor from fogging up on you. Status on your cooler and the amount of power the cooler is using. And then obviously you can set your target temperature, minimum duration for it to reach that temperature, and the same thing with the warming. Down here on the bottom left, we have our settings. You can set default gain, default offset, your USB limit, readout mode for the snapshots, readout mode for your sequences, and we have two of them, normal and low noise, depending on which way, you know, there's always a compromise, right? So you want low noise, or do you want to use more of that well depth? Target dew heater strength, it's default at 10, but you can take that all the way up to 100. I have not had to change this. I haven't had any issues so far, but then again, I've only had the camera for about a month, so summer's coming, it's going to be humid, but you have the ability to make changes. If you start having issues with the sensor still fogging up on you, just crank up the power a little bit. Fan speed defaults at 70%. You can obviously adjust that as well. I have not had to mess with any of these. Actually, this is a new profile for me, and I like my default gain to be set at 100, so I'm going to change that. So if I jump over to my imaging tab, here's my session running 5-minute exposures until about 5 o'clock in the morning on the Black Eye Galaxy. Again, you can look over here. I'm running at gain 100, offset 20. You can see my dew heater is on, the cooler is running. It's only using 2% of its power, and it's currently cooled down to minus 10 degrees Celsius. If we zoom in a little bit on this picture and just take a look at the noise from, again, a single exposure, 5 minutes, it's crazy. I mean, there is not a lot of noise in here for a single exposure. This camera does a fantastic job. So like I mentioned before when I was talking about my N.I.N.A profiles, I am running without my reducer tonight with my 8-inch Edge HD. So this is the native focal length at 2032 millimeters. And, you know, like I said, I'm really impressed. You know, we can ignore my dust motes you have over here. This one's really bad. I don't think I've ever seen one that dark before, but obviously that stuff will all be taken care of with the calibration frames, with our flat frames specifically. That's not from the camera, obviously. That's just dust in my image train. So I'm going to let this run until 5 in the morning. It should give me about 6 hours of integration time. And when I get up in the morning, we'll pump it through Siril, stack it, process it, and I'll show you the final image at the end of this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed the review. If you're on the fence about buying a new camera and you're looking at one of the higher end ones with the IMX571 chips in it, give Player One a serious consideration. I love this camera. It's just phenomenal. I did have issues during my session last night shooting the Black Eye Galaxy. Instead of that 6 hours I thought I was going to get, I ended up with about an hour and a half. But you know what? It kind of shows testament to the camera. I'm going to show you 90 minutes of data, and the results that I got with just an hour and a half are pretty darn good. I also want to thank my supporters for joining my memberships. If you'd like to see your name at the end of the videos, you can join them. Links are below. Don't feel obligated, as always, just a way to support the channel if you feel the need to. As always, I appreciate everybody's time. I'll see you in the next video. Clear skies. And here is my 90 minutes of the Black Eye Galaxy shot with the Player One Poseidon-C.